Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth academic series run by the Campaign Lab. This is a series where we introduce academic research, which will be of use to progressive activists across the UK. Today, well, before I jump into today's one, the next event will happen on the 27th of June, and that'll be how social networks shape political victories, lessons from Trump's 2016 campaign. Today, I'm joined by Leonard Metson. Leonard is an employee of the Campaign Lab, as well as the London School of Economics, where he is a PhD candidate. Len has a special interest in researching relationship campaigning, particularly in how campaigns shape political behavior. His PhD research thesis examines the development and implications of relational campaigning, a set of network-based strategies where campaigns attempt to utilize their supporters' social connections to reach voters. Beyond that, Len is very interested in persuasion and mobilization more broadly, as well as how developments in political technology and data science have changed campaign. With that, I'm pleased and excited to hand over to Len to present on this exciting topic today. We have the effects of tailored messaging. Len, over to you.
Thanks so much, Douglas. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to everyone for being here. I'm excited to present this project, which was done collaboratively with Campaign Lab, LSE, and a British pressure group. Just to kind of give an outline of the talk, I'll first go over the project context and introduce and just give an overview of the project that I'll be presenting today. I'll then go over some existing research to kind of give some background from previous academic research on message tailoring, which has some useful kind of standalone insights for campaigners, but will also help contextualize the experiment that we did in this project. I'll then jump into the experiment and explain what we did and the kind of setup of it, as well as the key findings on message tailoring and also people sharing the petition. And then I'll wrap up by just going over some conclusions and implications, especially for campaigners. So first, on the project context, the project is kind of mainly made up of a collaborative field experiment, which was done with a pressure group who were at the time running a petition campaign asking the government to implement proportional representation. And they wanted to test kind of how to get their supporters to sign this petition. And in particular, they wanted to test two different tactics for getting supporters to sign petitions. The first is message tailoring. So this was adapting parts of the emails that they sent out based on information that they held about their supporters' kind of issue priorities. And the second is relational recruitment, which is asking supporters to recruit their personal connections. And the overall question that we're trying to answer with this project is how can campaigns use their emails that they send out to supporters to mobilize petition signatures? What can this tell us about campaigning? What does this tell campaigners? Most obviously, it tells us how to get supporters to sign petitions. This is a kind of really widely used tactic and is helpful for demonstrating electoral pressure to representatives. So the two papers I've cited here. The first is basically shows that if you can mobilize supporters to call their legislators, that actually has a causal effect on the votes that the legislators make in, I think this was in the US, in kind of local parliaments. And then the second citation shows that in the UK, there's at least a correlational relationship between the number of signatures that a petition has in a constituency and the content of the speeches that the MP who represents that constituency makes. So petitions are a useful tool in themselves, but also understanding how to get supporters to sign petitions tells us how to get supporters to take action more generally. And we might expect these findings to apply to comparable behaviours that campaigns also want to mobilise, such as writing to their legislators, calling their legislators, or making donations. Onto the existing research, it's always good to start with definitions. Like many things in campaigning, message tailoring is a label used to describe lots of different things. So I will quickly go over the understanding of message tailoring in academic literature and the one that we use in this project. So message tailoring, sometimes referred to as micro-targeting or message targeting, has kind of two components to it. The first is using known or sometimes inferred or predicted information about the recipient. And the second element is using that information to adapt messages that are then sent to different recipients. And what is adapted, as well as the kind of information that is used, can vary a lot. Sometimes messages are designed to appeal to different groups. They might be about different kind of regions, or they might highlight different issues. And that's the type of tailoring that we use in this experiment. And tailoring can also take different forms. We usually think of kind of micro-targeting as being about Facebook ads or online content, but all sorts of communication could be targeted, including emails sent out to supporters, door-to-door and kind of phone canvassing, as well as kind of direct mail. And just to make this a bit more concrete, I'll give two examples of tailoring, one tailoring that was actually done and one hypothetical. So the first is from this experiment by Kaller, Levine, and Brookman. They embedded tailoring into a face-to-face canvassing campaign. So this was in the US, and they worked with a pressure group who were trying to change public opinion about abortion rights and get people to take action to kind of defend abortion rights in the US. And volunteers of that campaign were going door to door, knocking on citizens' doors and engaging in persuasive conversations. The intervention that they tested was that the canvassers first asked voters about their opinion about abortion. And as they listened to that response, they were trying to find the moral foundation that person was kind of speaking to when they gave their usually actually kind of opinion against abortion rights. And moral foundations is like a theory in political science and probably more actually social psychology, they'd probably claim it. But it basically says that people kind of have attitudes towards issues and things on the basis of distinct kind of dimensions of morality. So in the footnote, there are the kind of dimensions or the moral foundations that people tend to kind of talk about. And the idea is that different people kind of care more about different moral foundations. So for some people, liberty and the absence of oppression is really important. So an abortion argument that says, look, people should be free to access the healthcare they need might appeal more to that person. So during the conversation, they were trying to kind of glean which moral foundation the person was arguing against abortion with. And then in their counter-argument, they tailored their counter-argument to kind of explicitly name that moral foundation and provide a kind of counter-argument that speaks to that. So they would start their kind of their pitch with, just like you, I value, and then kind of insert moral foundation. And they find some mixed findings of this. It seems to have increased the likelihood that people would take action in support of abortion rights, but didn't kind of reliably shift attitudes in the long term. A second example, which is a bit more similar to what we did in this project, is tailoring that can be used in direct mail. So if we take this leaflet that was sent out during the general election, and just a quick disclaimer, I don't know if this was a tailored message. I've just pulled this from the elections leaflet library as an example of the type of mailer that could be tailored. Imagine the candidate knew what Christopher cares the most about. You could see how they could easily change the NHS bit of this to maybe, for example, schools in your area, or anything that kind of, any issue that is particularly salient to that person. So that this gets quite similar to the tailoring that we did in this project. Kind of a bit of background on why we think tailoring works. So starting point here is understanding kind of what we mean when we say a message works. So the causal effect of a message on an individual is a kind of hypothetical comparison between the outcome of interest had they received the message of interest and the outcome that we're interested in if they hadn't received the message. We usually talk about the average effect of messages when we run experiments, when we run A/B tests. We're comparing kind of group averages, but not everyone reacts to messages in the same way. And this concept is known as treatment heterogeneity. And this is kind of what drives the effectiveness of tailoring. So how does this apply to tailoring? To explain this, I'm going to give a really extreme example of a tailored message campaign. So we have two messages. Message A says we will allocate 100% of spending to the south. And message B says we'll allocate 100% of spending to the north. We have two groups. Group A are the southern residents and Group B are the northern residents. Imagine we can see the effect of this message on group and A and B separately, and then the overall effect in this on this plot on the right. And we can also see whether the effect it has is kind of larger, so towards the top of this axis or smaller. If we sent out message A to everyone, we might expect that Group A reacts very strongly, very positively to this. They're learning that they're going to get 100% of the spending, whereas Group B would react much more weakly or even possibly negatively. And then when we take the kind of overall effect of that, it sort of cancels itself out and ends up somewhere in the middle of those two groups. And the other way around if we send message B to everyone. And you can probably guess where I'm going, but if we send Group A message A and Group B message Group B, then the overall effect is kind of as strong as the effect for each group, because there's no group that is reacting kind of less positively to the message. In reality, tailoring is rarely this extreme, bar some problematic examples from recent campaigns. However, the same logic applies. In any case where you have different messages that work better or worse for different groups, if you can give the message that works best to each group, the kind of overall effect of the message will be stronger. Academic literature has also looked, and actually has mainly looked at why the conditions under which tailoring doesn't work. So this paper by Garn shows that when messages are too tailored, they tend to backfire a bit. So first, if it's kind of tailored on one dimension, it seems to be a bit more effective. If it's tailored on two dimensions, it starts becoming less effective. And once you start tailoring on kind of multiple dimensions, there actually seems to be a backlash to that. And the reasons that the kind of scholars argue this is the case is that when messages are over-tailored, it makes voters or the recipients in general feel manipulated. And also the messages kind of become too good to be true. So is it really the case that you're going to spend all your money on, young men in this ward in London? People stop kind of believing the message. And this interesting paper by Hirsch and Schaffner kind of developed this theory a lot before kind of this was being tested. But they basically argue that voters rarely assume that campaigns get things wrong. So when they receive a correctly targeted message, they kind of like it, but they ignore it because it's too good to be true. But when they receive an incorrectly targeted message, they dislike it, but take it seriously because they assume it's not a targeted message. They assume that's going to everyone, which kind of highlights another important dynamic that targeting and tailoring works best when you can correctly deliver the right messages to the right people. That leads me nicely onto what we did. So in general, the academic literature has mostly looked at tailoring in terms of communication between political parties and the kind of mass electorate, and also mostly looked at tailoring that's been focused on kind of appeals to kind of broad groups. But we wanted to know whether a campaign organization that has kind of good information on its supporters can use that information to directly tailor messages. So we worked with a pressure group who had recorded the most important issues for some of its supporters. And we took a sample of these supporters, which was in total just over 11,000 people. And this was all the subscribers who were not recorded as already having signed the petition that the campaign was being run around. And we had a most important issue recorded for them. This was an experiment which involved randomly assigning people to different treatment conditions. So we assigned them to receive no email, an untailored kind of baseline email, and then one of two tailoring strategies. And in the next couple of slides, I'll show what those messages look like. But just to note, the reason that we use randomization is because it ensures that the only difference between the people receiving each type of message is the message they received, which means that we can compare the rate at which they signed the petition and kind of interpret that as a causal effect. This is what the random assignment looked like. So we took our experimental sample, we assigned 10% of them to receive no email, and then a third of them, or 30% of them, to receive either an untailored email, which I call treatment one, an unstated tailored email, and on the next slide I'll show you what those look like, or a stated tailored email. And grayed out is the second dimension of assignment that we did, which I'll come on to when I talked about the recruitments that people made. But just for now, focus on this tailoring condition and focus on the 4 groups. So the different kind of scripts or the variations that we included in the message was first, I'll show you the unstated tailored email. So in the bit that kind of talked about issues, the tailoring here was that in the message, by giving everyone equal voice and vote, electoral reform ensures urgent issues like, and then here we inserted the issue that they had said was important and will remain at the top of Parliament's agenda. The second tailoring strategy, which we've called stated tailoring, does the same thing, but adds this statement at the top of it, which really makes the tailoring explicit. So we added, when we asked you what matters most to you, you said your own issue was one of the most important issues facing the UK, and then it went into this tailored sentence. We compare that to 2 baselines. So one baseline is an untailored email, which was exactly the same, except we used a random other issue. So they weren't getting the issue that they had identified as being most important. And then we also compared that to the group who didn't get an email at all. To measure the outcome, we measured whether individuals had signed the petitions after 2 days and then after 10 days. After 10 days, the experiment ended, and I'll show you all the outcomes I show you today are from the after 10 days. Importantly, the petition was publicly available and well kind of advertised, came up on the first page on Google. So it's not the case that not sending someone an email meant that they couldn't access the petition at all, which means we are comparing kind of the baseline of no email, just people coming across it in the world or seeing it publicly advertised versus a specific email to that person. Onto what we found. I'm going to show you the results on this plot, and what this is showing, or is going to show, is the signature rate within each group. So on the y-axis is the percentage of that group who had signed the petition after 10 days, and then on the x-axis is each of the groups. So first, our no email pure control baseline, 2.3% of that group signed the petition. So actually kind of goes to show that people were coming across this through kind of adverts and Googling proportional representation petitions. Just something to note, as it turned out, the 10th day of the experiment was polling day itself. So actually more people in the control group than we might have expected on a different day probably were kind of seeking out to sign petitions on proportional representation, given kind of headlines at the exit poll about this being the 2024 election being the kind of most disproportionate election in British history. But if anything, that will kind of make the additional effect of an email slightly smaller. Moving on to the untailored email, so people who got a random other issue in their email, 3.3% of that group signed the petition. And we can take the effect of the untailored email versus no email as the difference between these groups, which is just under a percentage point, and kind of on the margin of being kind of that difference being statistically significant. Looking at the first tailoring condition, so this is where they get their own issue, but not this statement above it. We see that the signature rate is not much different to the untailored email. The difference between these groups is 0.2 of a percentage point, and this difference is not statistically significant, which suggests that kind of just matching the issue alone isn't enough to kind of increase the effect of tailoring. When we look at the stated tailoring condition, however, we see that there's actually like a larger uplift in signatures. 4.1% of that group who received the tailoring and this kind of explicit statement about the tailoring signed the email. This is significantly different by about 1 percentage point from the untailored email, and kind of just over half a percentage point more than the unstated tailored email, but a bit less statistically significant as well. We also kind of merged in everyone who'd received any kind of email to compare that to the pure control group, and we looked at how quickly they signed the emails after receiving them. And what we see is that almost everyone who signed the petition and got an email did so either on the day that the email was sent or the day after, which kind of shows us that people, you know, when you're running an email campaign, you'll get most of your results within kind of 1 day of doing that, which has some implications I will come on to later on. Briefly on sharing, the second dimension to this experiment was on kind of getting people to share the petition and this relational recruitment strategy. So if you recall, people who received an email were kind of then assigned, kind of split into 2 groups. They were either asked to share in the share ask condition or not asked to share in the no share ask condition. And the share ask looked like this. So it said, once you've signed, please take the time to share the petition with people you know. Each friend, family member, or colleague you can recruit to sign the petition brings us 1 step closer to achieving PR. Sharing is the most powerful thing you can do to help our campaign. We found no effect of this ask on the number of people that they had recruited. And the reason for this is that people who recruit kind of tend to do so anyway, whether they're asked or not. So it seems that just asking doesn't kind of move people who wouldn't otherwise recruit their friends and family to the campaign to start recruiting. And we wanted to dig into this a bit more and kind of understand who are these people who are sharing spontaneously, and how can we get people who aren't to start. And to do that, we kind of looked at 2 different data sets. So one was the kind of full signature list, which had people who are both in the experiment and not in the experiment in it. So in total, just around 55,000 people. And we looked at the kind of distribution of how many people each signature had kind of recruited. And what we see is this kind of really, really skewed distribution. So almost 55,000, almost everyone recruited 0 people to the campaign. And then on the right, we see a kind of zoomed in version of what's down here. And we see that almost everyone recruited 0, then by far the next largest amount that people were recruiting is 1, and actually only kind of a handful of people were recruiting any more than 10 people to the petition. Which kind of leads us to the conclusion that recruitment in petition campaigns in its kind of status quo is driven by very few people, whereas most people recruit 0 people. We then turned to another source of data. So this was a survey run by YouGov, which asked people whether they'd be willing to ask their friends and family in an election to A, turn out to vote, and B, vote for a specific candidate. And what we did is we trained a random forest machine learning model on these 2 questions to try and predict what makes someone answer yes to that. So what makes someone say that they're willing to try and influence their friends and family during an election. And what we find, what this plot is showing is the kind of importance of all of these variables, which is their ability to predict whether someone will say yes to these questions. And what we find is political attention is clearly the kind of the best predictor of whether people are willing to recruit others to campaigns. So kind of what we learned from this exercise is that people who share spontaneously are highly engaged, potentially a bit weird, and they're also likely to know other kind of already engaged and potentially weird people, which is less helpful to us because if we can get supporters with more kind of diverse personal networks to be sharing with the people that they know, this kind of brings a new element of helpfulness to the campaign by allowing information to spread to kind of harder to reach audiences, which campaigns struggle to reach their kind of direct communication. So this kind of kicked off a new set of work looking at how we get a broader set of campaign supporters to share petitions. Cool. I'll just wrap up with some kind of key conclusions and takeaways before leaving plenty of time for kind of questions. So in terms of the key findings, we found that tailored emails were only more effective than untailored emails when they referenced the tailoring. And specifically, it was this statement that seemed to drive the kind of increased effectiveness. We also found that all emails were effective compared to sending no email at all, which is perhaps unsurprising. But it seems that most people who responded to the email did so within 1 day, which kind of I'll come on to the implication of that in the next slide. But finally, just on the sharing, we also found that just asking people to share things doesn't seem to be enough to get them to recruit others to the campaign. The implications of this, the kind of applied implications for this are as follows. So tailoring using kind of data that's been disclosed by your supporters works. But when you do that, you should be kind of explicit about it and use it as an opportunity to demonstrate responsiveness. So saying, you've told us this, this is how we think the action we're asking you to take supports your kind of goals and supports your most important issue. So please take the action. And it doesn't seem to work to kind of use information to do more subtle versions of tailoring. That doesn't seem to be much more effective than just kind of random issues. We also learned that emails are effective, but I guess the implication here is that they're most effective when the recipient can act immediately on the call to action that you're asking them to do. So for a petition, people can immediately kind of click and sign the petition. But if we wanted to apply this to something like getting people to turn out to vote or volunteer, it suggests that email should not be used to kind of ask people to do that, but maybe ask them to sign up for reminders when there's an election coming or when there's opportunities to volunteer, something that they can kind of respond to immediately that might enable you to contact them with a stronger, maybe more personal form of contact, like a phone call on election day or when you need people to turn out and volunteer. And it also kind of tells us we need a bit more work on how to move people who wouldn't otherwise share to share. And we're keen to kind of work out how to do that because we think that's particularly useful for campaigns. That's everything I've got in the kind of prepared bit of the presentation. For the next bit of the workshop, I'm happy to take any questions either on the presentation or kind of the project or tailoring and recruitment strategies more generally.
Everyone's interested in asking questions, please raise your hand and then we'll highlight your question. Len, I do have a question, sort of using my status as the moderator here of this presentation. I do have a question to get us started. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned that a very small number of people are responsible for the bulk or a disproportionately significant number of the recruitments and spreading. What do we know about them?
Yeah, so from the kind of petition data itself, which I showed here, we don't know a ton about them. It seems that these people who are kind of recruiting over 100 probably quite influential people with large online followings who had kind of tweeted the petition. From the data that we did with YouGov, in general, these people tend to pay a lot of attention to politics. They tend to be younger. They tend to vote for left-wing parties generally, but also people who vote for reform appear to be quite willing to ask other people to vote for reform, which is has some kind of worrying implications for progressive campaigners. So yeah, they tend to be the kind of like typical activist, the same things that predict participation in direct activity generally seem to be predicting like participation in this kind of share ask activity. The reason that it's useful to kind of get these people who are more down this end of the distribution sharing petitions is that they probably know people who wouldn't have otherwise signed the petition. So someone who's incredibly well connected, who's incredibly kind of engaged in politics, is probably sharing this petition to other people who are also kind of similarly engaged in politics, who might even be subscribed to the same kind of mailing list as others. But I think, yeah, if you can get people who are like a bit less keen to start doing this, then you can potentially reach a wider audience. Nathan, yeah.
Oh, thanks. That was great. Thank you. That was really interesting and yeah, really well explained. I had two questions about you mentioned the random forest that you're trying to kind of try to predict who's most likely to ask people to, yeah, that. So one is how did you measure political attention in people? And the other is were there any sort of demographics or features that really weren't important at all that actually did not make a difference?
Yeah, great question. So this all came from a survey. So everything, all of these variables were measured in the survey. The political attention measure is it literally asks people how much attention do you pay to politics on a scale from 0 to 10. So it's a self-reported outcome. In terms of unimportant things, this was quite a while ago, so I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But basically, it seems that anything past kind of vote choice, maybe income drop off. So there are about, I think there are probably like 30 variables in the model, and I've shown you the top 6. So anything past that, so they would have asked, whether they live in a rural or urban area, whether they, things like turned out to vote in the last election. I mean, a lot of this will be kind of captured in other variables, and it's the reason that we use the random forest model instead of like a regression, and because it allows kind of the thing that is most predictive, regardless of its like kind of correlation or structure of other variables to emerge, which is a kind of useful way of looking at this problem, because whoever these people are, whether they pay more attention because they vote a lot or they live in a wealthy area, it seems that the attention is the thing doing the driving in this. The age also seemed to be quite important, and just what this doesn't tell us is the shape of that relationship, but it was kind of younger people who are more willing to share, to ask their friends and family to turn out and vote for a specific candidate. And the other thing just to note is that this survey was run in, I think, 2020 or something like that. So it is a relatively different political context. I think there was probably quite a lot of like Jeremy Corbyn supporters in that younger age category who are kind of really willing to advocate for him on behalf of the Labour Party amongst their friends. Now that seems to be being picked up more in the kind of Green voters. So we looked at kind of this by party in 2020, where Labour was the party that were most kind of willing to ask people to vote for a specific candidate, whereas now it's kind of Reform followed by Greens followed by Lib Dems being the most willing. Well, I actually don't know who is behind the Hannah O'Rourke hand. No, I can't hear you now. I don't know if that's a me problem or
Sorry, one sec. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I'm posing as Hannah O'Rourke. Sorry, everyone, to burst the bubble. But yeah, I had a question then, which is about platforms. So one of the things that I think is quite possibly true, or certainly be interested to know if it is true, is that people engage quite differently with different platforms. And so and might have different expectations around, for example, tailoring on different platforms. So if you send people an email that's tailored versus untailored, that might be different to, for example, if you're WhatsApping people or engaging with them in different contexts. And I wondered if you had any insights into if platforms make a difference vis-a-vis tailoring and vis-a-vis message sharing, and also whether that relates to what we were just talking about in terms of, are we likely to get older people being super sharers on Facebook versus, other platforms? So yeah.
Yeah, really interesting. I think platforms are important in two ways. I think the platform on which things are shared are important. I think that is important in that it tells you who people are sharing to. So when they kind of post things out broadly onto Facebook, we might expect that to be sharing to different people to when they're kind of doing one-on-one WhatsApp messages. But in terms of the platform that's used to share, I think it's important when kind of considering the conditions under which tailoring doesn't work. So in general, I think people have it's important to kind of consider the message recipient's kind of expectation of things being tailored. So on Facebook, they know that Facebook holds a lot of data about them. So when they see tailored messages, maybe they're kind of less likely to react badly to that. They're less likely to feel manipulated. They have some awareness that this is the sort of thing that happens on Facebook. Whereas when you're doing this in emails or in kind of direct mail, especially if you're doing this as a kind of political campaign to voters, if you start sending people mails that seem a bit like creepy and are using information that voters don't necessarily know that you hold on them, you might start to get into these kind of backlash effects. The platform also kind of conditions how well you can target tailored messages. So when you're doing something on a kind of automated or like digital platform like email, the way that the partner organization in this project implemented the tailoring is they literally kind of had a tag in the email that said insert most important issue based on the recipient's most important issue. So there's like very low risk of that being mistailored. When you're kind of trying to do tailoring on the doorstep or like in mailers where the data that you hold on kind of the people that are receiving the message is a bit fuzzy, or you're kind of predicting things about them, lots of tailoring kind of makes assumptions about who might be responsive to a message based on their kind of like demographics. So we might send a message about primary school closures to 30 to 44-year-olds because we predict that they have a kind of as primary school aged child. But so I think that kind of conditions how likely it is you're mistargeting things or kind of how people feel if they realize something's targeted, which can then kind of lead to these backlash effects. At the same time, the results from this experiment seem to show that when you actually are like explicit in the tailoring that you're doing and you're using a data source that people like feel is legitimate, there is like advantage to being open about it and kind of telling people that you are tailoring things. I imagine it would be different if you kind of said, we've been using your phone camera and we know that, you like take your dog for a walk every morning. If you're explicit about that, people probably react badly, but where someone has told you information, tailoring messages on that information and telling them that you're tailoring messages on that information seems to actually be what kind of makes the tailoring work. At least in this context or in the context of communication between you and your supporters. Yeah, that's good.
Leonard, could you give us an example of what this tailoring looks like?
What kind of?
You said that so you said that the messages are tailored to. So first you say that people are informed of the tailoring, that the messages are tailored, and that this then has the most positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
In that message, what is an example of this message? What does it typically look like, as opposed to a message which is tailored, but they're not informed of it?
Yeah, so in this example, that difference looked like this. So in the kind of unstated tailoring, we just changed the issue, whereas in the stated tailoring, we changed the issue and included this kind of statement saying, this is the information we're using. and we're using it because you told us it. This works kind of very well for issue tailoring. I guess it'd be kind of different if you were tailoring on someone's region. Maybe it wouldn't be as effective to say, you told us you lived in Scotland. Here is how this issue impacts Scotland. Please sign our petition on X. I mean, maybe that would be kind of effective. And, we see lots of campaigns that kind of try and use local information or frame things in local ways. And Campaign Lab has done some work on that, of course. But I think what worked especially well in this case, and the difference that was easy to kind of make in this case was this additional message that kind of signaled responsiveness. And I think there's there is some kind of literature on responsiveness in organizations. So Hari Khan is a big person who works on this and kind of developed this theory. But that kind of says that kind of one of the things that really make people engage in organizations and keep people in organizations are conditions that make them feel like they have an ongoing relationship with the organization. And one of the ways that this kind of stated tailoring might be working is by kind of demonstrating that. So you previously told us information, we're now doing something with that information and linking that to action that we're taking, possibly is kind of getting people into a place where they feel that the things they tell the campaign organization are used by the campaign organization, and also the campaign organization is acting in accordance with the things that are important to them. I think the other thing here is that this proportional representation case was relatively easy to tailor based on different issues. So this wasn't a petition about a particular issue. It's a kind of petition about structural change, which makes it easy to tailor in terms of issues. So we need to do this big thing because it will help this specific thing. I don't know how this would work in a context where there's a petition on kind of one of these issues, and whether it be as easy to tailor. But I think all of these things would be kind of great things to test in more experiments and try and see how far this general finding applies throughout different contexts.
Anyone else have any other questions? If so, I do have one more in my back pocket. Cool. Then just a quick, I suppose, summary question. If you had to give advice to someone starting a petition, what advice would be, what is the most important advice that you would give? Summarized, I suppose, into a one-sentence soundbite, sort of based on this research to help them get started.
Yeah, I think if this is a campaign organization, I think the kind of key insight here is that collecting data on individuals can be helpful. Being able to track who's sharing petitions to who can help you learn things. And if you combine that with data about people, you can start to learn more about who is sharing things. But on the tailoring, you can use that information to adapt messages, which seem to work much better than kind of plain messages. And just to kind of highlight that effect of the tailored message versus the untailored message almost kind of doubles that effect when you include that statement, which also, and this is not one sentence, Douglas, but also kind of goes to show, I think, that we often think that tailoring is something that should be done secretly or might have some backlash or something like this, but the results of this experiment seem to show that when you're in a similar position to the context of this experiment, being kind of upfront about what you're doing and being explicit in how you're tailoring messages not only doesn't lead to some negative consequences, but actually drives the effect of tailoring.
Thanks, Len. Yeah, I suppose it's a consistent messaging that comes through in a lot of research and experience that people have, is that be honest with the electorate, very important, and be upfront, and that'll reward you. It's got sort of its own virtues, and this is good evidence of that. I've got a poll for everyone who participated. Thank you to everyone who participated. Please, please, please sign the poll. No, we'll share that poll with you all shortly. Yes, here we go. Please fill out the poll. It's just 2 simple questions. Has this been helpful? Would you like more of these presentations again? What are the responses? Noam, could you please give us an update on how many responses we're getting? I want to get as many folks as possible participating in this poll.
We're at 7 out of 10 right now. So
7 out of
more
10.
people out there.
3 more folks. Please participate and fill out that survey. Oh yes, Len, will you be able to share the slides with everyone? Well, I will.
Yeah, I can.
So this. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, happy to. If you email me, my email is on the website down below. I can share them to you, but also I think we will be able to distribute them through the list.
That's right.
We can share all the slides to attendees.
That's right.
Yeah.
We will be writing this up into a blog post, which will feature on our website. We'll put the slides there. This presentation is recorded. We'll upload that to our YouTube channel, and we'll put the recording in the blog post as well. So you'll have access to all of those in the blog post when it is done, which should be done in the next couple of days. I hope that's helpful. Noam, how are we with survey responses?
We're all good. Thank you, everybody.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for participating and joining us today. And thank you, Len, for giving this fantastic, fascinating presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Cool. Like I mentioned at the beginning, the next event that we'll be having will happen on the 27th of June. We'll be talking about social media networks and how they shape political victories during the Trump 2016 campaign. Please join us then. I'm also really looking forward to that one. That's a particularly fascinating one. Cool. And John Bryden will be presenting that. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, that's it for this presentation. Thanks, everyone. Bye.